please subscribe and don't forget to press the bell icon to get notified whenever we upload a new video.
But as of now, let's cut across to Shireen, who is in conversation with M. Damodaran, former chairman Sebi.
Well, thanks very much. Yes, indeed. We are now joined by a very special guest, the former chief of the market regulator, Sebi. Joining us today is Mr. M. Damodaran to discuss whether we are seeing a governance crisis in the country. Mr. Damodaran, always a pleasure speaking with you. Thanks very much for joining us on CNBC TV 18. You know, we spoke a few days ago, Mr. Damodaran, and this was well before the news of ICICI Bank and Axis Bank had hit the headlines. And when I asked you then whether there was a fear that India was on the verge of losing its governance premium, you said that that was indeed the case. In light of the recent developments, how concerned would you be?
Well, I'm certainly concerned, but let me make a prefatory statement. All the observations that I will share with you are based on the information that I have gathered through press reports. I have no access to any other source, nor do I have any personal information. So let me get that caveat out of the way. And having said that, let me share with you the fact that I am deeply concerned because the governance premium that will differentiate one market from another, other things being equal, is seemingly being lost, and we need to work overtime to restore that.
You know, you said that you're deeply concerned about the loss in governance premium. But let me start by asking you specifically about what you believe have been the shortcomings. And let me start by talking to you about the Axis Bank case, because that is a matter where there is official confirmation that has come in as of last night from the board. Now, what we are given to understand is that on the 8th of December in 2017, the Axis Bank board to the Reserve Bank had cleared the proposal of reappointing Shikha Sharma. Now, we are given to understand that the regulator has expressed some apprehensions, on the back of which the Axis Bank board has now decided to cut short Shikha Sharma's tenure till December of 2018 as opposed to 2021. In light of this particular development, what are the shortcomings? Do you believe the regulator should have been more transparent? If indeed there was an issue with Shikha Sharma's reappointment, then should the board not have been more transparent? How do you understand this?
Well, as far as the regulator is concerned, let me say this, and I've said this several times before, regulation is never carried out in the open. So no matter what the merits of transparency are, there are some decisions that the regulator will take following a process, addressing issues of content, and then sharing the final decision. And I don't think it would be fair to expect the entire process to play out in public. That said, what is the development in the Axis Bank case? The board recommended a term of 3 years. The Reserve Bank, after some consideration, appears to have said, we will give you a year during which you find a substitute. And now Shikha Sharma herself has said that don't wait for a year, I will leave at the end of December. And the board seems to have accepted that and is proceeding accordingly. What the reasons are, they're not in the public domain. There's speculation that it is the mounting NPAs, but I think speculation alone should not drive us to any conclusions.
If you're saying speculation alone shouldn't drive us to conclusions, the possible triggers could have been, of course, the fall in asset quality, the further deterioration as far as asset quality is concerned. There is speculation it could be linked to what we saw happen during the demonetization phase and so on and so forth, the WhatsApp results leak. But that's not specific just to Axis Bank. There have been several other banks that have had similar problems. The question then is, why is the regulator choosing to single out Shikha Sharma? In light of the fact that we don't have adequate information, there is really no conclusive answer to that question. So how do you then respond to that?
I don't think it's about singling out anyone. What they would have considered would be a totality of circumstances. Asset quality certainly would be at the top of the list. They would have looked at how asset quality has deteriorated over time and whether any steps have been taken to put in place recovery measures Has the problem been arrested? Is it on the decline? Or is it something that is going to get worse with the development of time? There could be some of the other issues that you mentioned, but as you rightly observed, these are not specific to Axis Bank. Several other banks have also come for adverse notice during all of those developments. So this is a call that a regulator has taken. Mind you, she's done 3 terms of 3 years each and will be doing another term, so it's a good 10 years. And if the RBI believes that it is time for a leadership change based on all these factors, I wouldn't for one second guess the RBI on this.
Sure. You're saying that we shouldn't second guess the RBI, and that the regulator often conducts its business in confidentiality, and it's not necessarily fair to expect that this is done in public. But what about the board? And I'm asking you specifically about the board of Axis Bank, because in December, if they reappoint Shikha Sharma for a tenure of 3 years, given the apprehensions then expressed by the Reserve Bank, should the board then not have been more transparent? I mean, it looks like the board is capitulated in light of what the Reserve Bank has said, perhaps not put up a strong enough defense for why it chose to give her a 3-year term in the first place. What does that speak in terms of the board?
Well, there are 3 players in this. There is the RBI, there is Shikha Sharma, and then there is the board. I think the RBI, what I think of what it has done, I've already shared with you. As far as Shikha Sharma is concerned, she was given a 3-year term, and now she has volunteered that she will step down in December. And I think that is something that you cannot fault, because she could have continued till May of next year, going on the reduced 1-year term. She's chosen not to do that, giving enough time to the bank to find a successor. There's another development, which is before she was given this term, the board had appointed a search firm, which is what we were told, to locate a successor. Now, the board's role in all of this is not very clear. It's not something that is confidence-inducing. The reason I'm saying this is that, as you said rightly, if there were valid reasons to look at a 4th term of 3 years, and the board decided that collectively, when the regulator said, sorry, we don't agree with you on that, there should have been, I'm not saying a pushback, you don't push back with a regulator, but there should have been a continuing conversation saying this is why we think she should lead the bank for 3 more years. Because the way this decision is taken is that when the term is about to expire, you ask yourself 2 questions. Who is best to lead the bank in the next 3 years or 5 years or whatever? You don't ask the question, should we give her another extension? That's not the way to approach a succession issue. So you look at who that is, and if the board for good reasons decided, especially after appointing a search firm, decided, no, we will give her another term, I imagine there would have been some reasons why they did that. Why did they not go back to the RBI and say, look, this doesn't show the bank or the board in good light, and we need to do that? I think somewhere that conversation, if it took place, must have been a cursory conversation. I hope it was not a one-sided conversation.
Well, we don't know whether it was a cursory or a one-sided conversation, so we have absolutely no information. But let me now move from Access to talk to you about the other development, and that has to do with ICICI Bank. Once again, this is a matter that was first brought to light in 2016. The action from an investigative agency perspective has only started now. Do you believe that it was right or appropriate for the ICICI Bank board to come out in support of Chanda Kochhar before the investigation has been concluded? Do you believe that it would be prudent for Chanda Kochhar to perhaps take a leave of absence till the investigation concludes?
The good thing about your questions is that you have answers which are the answers that I would like to come up with. But before that, let me say that this is a different bank, different from the rest of the banks in the Indian banking sector. Just look at the fact that they have 3 Padma Bhushans. I call this a Padma Bhushan bank. The only other Padma award was in the commercial banking space was given to Ramesh Gelli. Before this, he got a Padma Shri. I'm making an observation, I'm making no comments of any kind. So this is a systemically important bank. It's a Padma Bhushan bank. It's a bank from which I'm sure all stakeholders have expectations of a reasonably high order. Now, what the board has done is, to put it in telegraphic form, they seem to have jumped the gun. And the first statement spoke about one part of the allegations that are in public domain, which is the sanctioning of credit to a particular industrial house, saying that we were one among 20 that did it. She was not chairing the committee. The then managing director was chairing the committee, whatever. Now, that is something which maybe you can justify. You can say we looked at whatever was available to us. We did, so did several other banks. The loan went bad. It went bad on the books of other banks also. So unless there is clear intent of mala fide when you look at a standalone transaction, I think the board would be right in saying, look, we went through the right process. She was not involved as the leader of that particular decision-making process. Therefore, what are we complaining about? But the problem here is that there are at least two other legs to this transaction. The allegation that the person or the undertaking or the company that got the facility invested in a company that was promoted by the MD and CEO's husband is something that is very, very serious. Now, you can argue on the sequence, you can argue on the time that elapsed between one decision and another, but to my mind, it has conflict written all over it. At what stage did the MD and CEO get to know? Now, the husband says, he says, and his statement is in the public domain, I did not inform her till the gentleman resigned from my board. Are we buying that statement from him? Let the investigative agencies make up their mind. I don't think I should anticipate what the investigative agencies will come up with on that one. So even if, let's say for argument's sake, she did not know at that point of time, when she got to know what kind of a disclosure was made to the board, what kind of stepping back from the process regarding this company took place, were there any correctives put in place? See, normally when you join a board, you give a list of the companies that you're associated with so that there is no conflict of interest in the decision-making process, and you recuse yourself from the decision-making process. And you also say that any subsequent development on these lines will be brought to the notice of the board immediately. So if a company was set up subsequent to your becoming a director of the board, the minute it was set up and you perceived that there was a conflict, which clearly there was, you were obliged to bring it to the notice of the board. I'm not even getting into the third part, which is in the newspapers these days, which is the brother-in-law helping restructure assets, some of which have been financed by the bank. I think there are far too many things that make you feel uncomfortable. It's disquieting, to use a very, very mild word. And board should have appointed an independent inquiry authority, not do its own inquiry. Because there are stakeholders, there is reputation management. This can be done only by conducting an impartial inquiry. That's what everyone does, whether in India or outside.
So let me ask you this then, Mr. Damodaran, since you're saying that the board should have conducted an independent inquiry, let me ask you this in the context of what we've heard from rating agency Fitch. Now, Fitch, as of last night, has said that this is a reputational risk as far as ICICI Bank is concerned. In light of that, and in light of the developments that have taken place since the board first came out with its statement, and the fact that the investigative process continues, and so far, actually, Deepak Kochar or Chanda Kochar have not been interrogated by the investigative agencies. Do you believe that it would be prudent for the board to review its decision and perhaps ask for a leave of absence?
So the first point that you raised regarding the reputational risk issue. Reputation risk is written all over this series of transactions. You cannot have a bank which is the repository of faith and trust, not to mention money, suffer reputational risk of this nature and not be seen as addressing it. Because no matter what the reality, there is perception. And perception is what hits reputation far more than even reality does on occasion. So the reputation risk is huge. I also want to add this, that the mitigation for reputation risk resides at the level of the board and nowhere else. There are operational risks that reside where mitigation might reside elsewhere, but reputation risk is in the domain of the board. And the board should have been seen not as defensive, not as explanatory, not as, saying, okay, we've looked at this and we think there's nothing wrong. But say, okay, while we may believe there is nothing wrong, we are reaching out to an external agency, and there's no shortage of agencies who will actually do an objective study and give you this. So that is one. The second, as far as you're concerned, yes, the CBI process is firstly a PE, which is a preliminary inquiry, and then if they get some material, you go in for a regular case, which is the RC. Now, as far as the PE is concerned, the PE is against some named and some unnamed persons, from what I read in the papers. Two.
Yes.
I think they are doing a very detailed job of trying to get as much information. They're not rushing to file the RC. They're saying, let's see what is there in this case. Let us see whether this merits the conversion of the PE into the RC. And therefore, they're going through documents, they're talking to people, they're interrogating people, and whether this will lead to an RC or not, we do not know. Meanwhile, having regard to the reputation risk, I think the best thing for the board is, as you stated in your question, is for the board to request her or for Chanda Kochar herself to say, look, there's too much happening and the bank is more important than I am. And every institution is more important than any individual, no matter what his or her achievements. Therefore, I am stepping down for 3 months or 4 months till your inquiry report comes in, and then when it comes in, you take a call and let me know. That would have actually induced confidence. But saying that, yes, she's taking it bravely, she's continuing to do the work, all of that's fine, but it does not meet the certain tests.
Since you said, sir, that the ICICI board jumped the gun, what about the regulator? We've seen the regulator act in the Axis Bank case, which is completely different from the case that we're discussing, which is ICICI Bank currently. What kind of regulatory intervention would you expect in this matter?
I would not know whether the regulator is already in touch with the board. It's entirely possible the regulator is in touch with the board. As I mentioned up front, regulation is not carried out in public, so there are things that we would not know. I do not imagine that a regulator, after seeing all of this in the media, would be sitting back and saying, let's wait to see what develops. But as far as concrete action is taken, perhaps, and I'm only guessing, perhaps the view could be that there is an agency, a professional agency, which is looking into the matter. And should it reach a stage when an RC is filed, that is when we will give specific directions to the board. It's possible. I'm guessing just like everybody else is. But to say that the regulator is just sitting back and watching, I don't think might be the correct position.